These three women, old friends and new, and I spent some time talking this week, or maybe it was already last week, about the word resilience, which is this conversation really informed how I was looking at the 3 days that we're spending together. It's a word that we're hearing often as we try to navigate this landscape during a time of great transition. It's a word that intrigues me because we all have very different interpretations and some the same, and a myriad of ways of finding what resilience is in each of our lives, whether we're 17, 20, 40, or in our 60s. I brought it up in conversation when I was talking to this awesome group of women to hear what their thoughts were, and was so inspired that I mentioned to all the speakers that it should be and could be the through line for the weekend. So I wanted to start with Laurel, whose words when we spoke really sparked me to start thinking about resilience in a way that I never had. And it was based on a definition that she had read in a book that had been so resonant. And Laurel, I'd love for you to, first of all, welcome, and welcome to all of you. It's beautiful to see your faces in little squares all together. Laura, I'd love to hear just your framing of that word.
Yeah, thank you so much, Judy. You know, it's interesting because as a scientist, sometimes the first thing I think of when we talk about resilience is actually about ecosystems and species and the resilience of different natural systems. But in this context, I want to talk about the definition that actually changed the way I thought about my own resilience, which is I read a book called Option B. And this was a book written by Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant. Actually, I have it right here, although I lost the jacket, so you want to just see the side. And Sheryl wrote it with Adam after she lost her husband. And so it's very much about dealing with grief. But I think the biggest thing that I took away from it and what really, shaped how I think about my own resilience is the idea that we're not born with a finite amount of it. On the contrary, we grow like a plant or a system or an ecosystem. It's a growth process that we develop resilience by going through things and going through challenges. And so as I think about how we address these challenges, it gave me a lot of, it actually gave me some solace knowing that something being hard didn't mean it would always be hard. And that the hard and challenging things that I was feeling was evidence of my resilience growing. And so in times and places where things have gotten really tough, and I would say this past year has absolutely been a demonstration of that, those challenging feelings very much are showing me, there's more there. And I have a lot more to say about it, but I'll pass it back and I'd love to hear from the others.
Judy, you're muted.
One of the biggest takeaways I had from our initial conversation that resilience is literally a muscle. And then the only way you build muscle is you keep going back and you keep finding ways to pass through a moment in time or a challenge in life. And then I spoke to Amanda, and Amanda went and picked up a book that she held up as well. And I started to think about, we're all looking for the opportunity to figure out how we navigate. And we have these books sitting right next to us. And from them comes the wisdom to help us go forward. So Amanda, I'd love you to just talk about that and that book in your life.
Absolutely. Thank you, Judy. Thank you all. And congratulations for being here in such a worthy set of conversations. The fact that this book was sitting next to my bedside has been for some time. I really picked it back up and revisited it after our conversation, Judy. And it's quite aptly named Resilient by a neuroscientist named Rick Hansen. He's here in the Bay Area and speaks quite a bit about kind of the intersection between neuroscience and psychology and meditation and contemplation about a way to think about resilience in all of its both physical and psychological capacities. And as I was rereading it in preparation for this, I was thinking a lot about how we have to be thinking about the whole system. Laurel mentioned this word systems, and a very wise professor of mine in graduate school spoke about systems thinking quite literally in the food system. And it makes me think about how all of our inputs, all of the things that we intersect with, all the pieces of our own lives, of our businesses, of where we spend our money, where we get our money, who that supports, what good it does or harm it does. All of these things are coming together into how we are able to navigate or not. And I have to say, it gave me a tremendous amount of solace to reread this and think about resourcing myself. And frankly, that in a very difficult year, the way that I have become more resilient is recognizing that making very difficult decisions is actually sometimes the way to get through a difficult year. It isn't an either or, it's in fact having to go through the pain, as Laurel just mentioned, to be able to get to the hindsight that allows us to make sense of it all. And that's mostly what I've been thinking about in my own business and in the world this year.
Thank you, Amanda. And my dear, wonderful friend, Susan Griffin-Black, I must say that she provides me with a lot of the resilience that I have in my life. And during this time, we haven't been together. I'm so used to showing up at her sister's restaurant whenever and finding her and being there and taking so much from our conversations that I really have realized that I miss. But I think it's also people that allow us to be resilient, and the relationships that we have that we're now not having sitting next to each other. We're sitting next to each other in boxes. And Susan, I would love to just hear from my wise friend what resilience looks like to you in your life, and especially at this moment in time.
And so glad that you're all here, and so glad that we're here together. And thank you so much, my beautiful friend Judy, for all the amazing work that you do in the world for all of us. So let's start there. So I think that because I've had the privilege of being a Zen Buddhist practitioner and student for all these years, that it relates to what Marina was talking about being a spiritual activist and having somewhere community and teaching wise to go during these times, and to also think about in a way that feels very supported difficulty. And my teacher, Suzuki Roshi, who founded the San Francisco Zen Center, would say it would talk about beginner's mind, and so beginner's mind is sort of the antidote to thinking that you know something. So in the approach of these very, very difficult situations, really clearing the space to start fresh, to see clearly, and to be able to take a deep breath and meet life where it actually is, has been extremely helpful in in responding in a resilient way, and into being flexible, and to, when possible, having a sense of humor about everything that is happening, because it's sort of like just one unbelievable thing after the next, that we are all doing our best to navigate with flexibility and agility and love,
I love that. And Judy, sorry to jump in. And I love that you mentioned community, because I think even in ecosystems, right, the most resilient ecosystems are the diverse ones, the ones that can absorb challenge, or whether it's plague or locust or drought or whatever the challenge is in an ecosystem. The diverse systems are the ones that are most resilient to adverse change. And I think we as people, it's easy to think of resilience as being something that is something, it's just me. Like I need to be resilient, but it's not ever just you, right? You're resilient because of community, because of the community that you build or that you're part of. And you become more resilient, and your community becomes more resilient as you help one another. And that interaction is really key to being able to access your own resilience and grow it as you move through things.
Yes, yes. And I think just hearing little phrases from each of you: start fresh, see clearly, make hard decisions, step back, be flexible. How has this moment for each of you in time informed the present and help maybe encourage, inspire, force you to think differently about your businesses, your organizations in the future? And I don't love the word pivot, but what changes, what transformations have had to happen, even though you didn't plan them to happen, and maybe hasten that pace? Amanda.
Absolutely. I'm also not a fan of pivoting, but I think it is certainly the theme of this year. And in many ways, I am hesitant to speak of silver linings in such a tremendously difficult year, but I do think it's worth thinking about how to embrace the good that can come from shedding a rigid mindset around what success has to look like. So for example, Laurel mentioned diversity of an internal system. So Cowgirl Creamery and Tamales Bay Foods, we are an interconnected set of businesses, of channels of business. And this year has been obviously very negatively impacted by restaurants closing, where we sell our cheeses and our artisan products to, by our own stores having to close the doors. On the flip side, we've seen a tremendous amount of growth in our direct-to-consumer, our website, our e-commerce platform, which everybody is seeing. And it's not necessarily to say that that couldn't have been successful in the past, but it was this moment in time that required me to say to the team, we're going to change. We are going to take advantage of this opportunity and meet people where they are in their homes, bring them a moment of joy of our delicious product, something small that makes somebody's day, a box of cheese showing up on their doorstep. It's good for our business. It has preserved a piece of our business that we may have otherwise not been able to maintain. And I think being able to move quickly to take advantage of what might be good, and to understand that there will always be negative shocks to the system. And I think we have been able to embrace the positive in that sense.
Very nimble. And Susan, when all of this began, I immediately thought about my friend Susan, who had the product that everybody needed to have, and you couldn't possibly keep enough on the shelves. What was it like from your perspective? What changed happened? What was it like amid the maelstrom of hand sanitizer that was needed by everybody in the whole world? What was it like from your end?
And they canceled it. And so I kept traveling. You know, I was in Santa Fe for a bit, and then I was making my way back on March 11th. And that's really when everything was just chaotic. And I got home on a Friday night, and I got up on Saturday morning and walked around the corner to our little retail store. And there was a line around the corner for hand sanitizer. By the way, I also live really close to this sort of bar and nightclub called Sweetwater, and the Grateful Dead, Bobby Weir is part owner, and he plays there a lot. And so there's often a line around the corner when he's playing for tickets. So I'm kind of used to the line around the corner, however, not for hand sanitizer. So I was overwhelmed with like both anxiety and sadness at how people, at the fear, I guess, of, that this was a product that could actually be practical and functional and useful in this situation. So I went in the store and I just started handing everyone hand sanitizer, filled my pockets with hand sanitizer. I walked to the market. I gave it to all the cashiers, because as I kept going around the neighborhood to all of the places that carry any hand sanitizer, with toilet paper, everything was sort of, not on the shelf. So we made a pledge to try to increase our capacity to manufacture as much hand sanitizer and hand soap as possible, to give to, first responders, healthcare workers, firemen, teachers, whoever was really, out front, essential workers. And then we have only been producing for both brands, EO and Everyone, hand sanitizer and hand soap, with a few little other things here and there, but basically that's what we've dedicated our time and capacity to, because it's the thing that seems to be the most helpful and the most helpful response. So it's quite a challenge, because I don't think, in a way it's sort of an entrepreneurial dream to not be able to meet demand for something that you're making, and it is, but in this case, it's very anxiety producing and quite a challenge to not meet the demand for something that's useful.
Yeah, I can imagine seeing the lines and what that must have felt like. And thank you for what you're doing and what you've done. I wanted to go to a couple other questions. One is, if you could flash forward 5 years and look back at now, an unprecedented moment in all of our lives, what would you want to have learned from this moment in time? And what impact would you have hoped it would have had on your future journey? Laura, let's start with you.
The learned one is tricky, right? Because there's so much that we learn about ourselves when we're in situations where we have to rethink how we do everything. So I feel like there will be tomes written about what we've learned from this space. Professionally, as an organization, we've had to learn a lot about how to deal with something completely unprecedented, both in the research and the communication of the work that we're doing. But I think if I flash forward 5 years, the thing that I might reflect on more than any learning is actually a lot of gratitude for being home with my young son during a time when he is growing and changing really, really quickly. And as someone who runs an organization, and Amanda and Susan obviously understand this too, there's a lot of times when you work long hours and long nights, and at this point I probably wouldn't have had as much time with him. And so even already I can be grateful for the fact that I've seen more of him than I would have otherwise. But something that I hope I look back on and with pride and the impacts that I've had and that we've had is, Global Footprint Network has a platform with Earth Overshoot Day campaign where we reach tons of people. And as an organization, because of the work that we do, we have a little bit of a role in shaping narratives about how we think about this, right? And I'm really proud of the way that our organization was able to talk about Earth Overshoot Day moving over 3 weeks. The research that went into it, but also, the compassion that our communication, I think, brought. It's, as Amanda said, it's hard to find silver linings. And so when you look at something like the date moving back by over 3 weeks, you want to be like, oh, this is exciting. And under normal circumstances, it would be something that we would absolutely celebrate. But obviously this year, it's for all the wrong reasons. And I've been really proud of the way that we've been able to help talk about that in a way that, acknowledges how hard this is. And honestly, that's not the only thing that has been really challenging this year, right? We're also talking about, especially, in the US, but everywhere, you know, the role of race relations, and how the intersection of the environmental work and sustainability work that we do, how that intersects with health, how that intersects with race and access. And so, you know, getting a chance to bring more of the intersectionality language into our work is something that I'm proud of our team for doing, and something I hope, and, you know, in 5 years I look back on and say, yeah, we did the right thing. And we, you know, we didn't go along with what, you know, the traditional environmental language sounded like. We were really intentional about trying to find that together. And one thing that I'm really inspired by, especially in this group, is how students, young people right now are sort of, they've been brought up in the intersectionality aspect. And it's something that those of us who are a little older had to learn along the way. And it gives me so much more hope for our ability to be resilient to climate change, as a global community, not just as individuals, but that we're thinking about that in a more intersectional way.
Yeah. And I will say thank you, Laurel, to you for helping provide the language for the challenge that addressed all of this and the date moving back. We literally paraphrased Laurel in the framing of that challenge. And I think it woke us all up to the intersectionality of all of the challenges that are in front of us that we'd never really thought so deeply about. So 100% agree. And Amanda, I'd love to ask you the same. So 5 years.
Yes, 5 years from now. Well, I truly hope that in my own personal and professional development, I look back 5 years from now and I say that this all makes sense. Because I think it's really in hindsight to be able to, it's so difficult to know what we're learning right now and how it will fit into the future. But I truly believe that even unexpected difficulties will all add up to what the future successes look like. You know, a very wise person once told me that opportunity is the combination of preparedness and serendipity, that you have to prepare for whatever comes, but it's total luck when it's there, but you can't take advantage of it if you're not prepared somehow, some way. So I think these are two interlocking pieces that will add up together in the future. From a professional perspective, I do hope that we will have done the very best we can for my people, for the farmers we work with, the land that we have impact on. You know, I work in a for-profit business. It's something I have to think about from a financial perspective, but I try to talk about the fact that continuing to grow has impact, positive impact on all of the stakeholders in our whole ecosystem. So my resilience in this business this year, it's we are an essential business, but that seems a bit frivolous to say about delicious cheese, but still my resilience this year means that our farmers are better off and they're not selling their cows or abandoning the systems they've worked hard to build. I'd like to think that we have been some force for good, even in a difficult year.
I would politely argue that you are incorrect, and cheese is absolutely essential.
I was going to say the same thing. Cheese help get us through. And yes.
Small moments of joy this year, that is for certain.
I see Susan nodding as well. Susan, for you, the same question. 5 years looking back at what you want to have learned from this moment.
It's really changed my thinking, and I think globally the thinking on how we work and how we come together and how much flexibility has been infused into this learning and process, and that it's much more humanizing. And I think especially for women with, you know, infants and young children, it's brought a bit of sanity, and that never has to go away. And so I think that's a beautiful thing. And also this notion of, you know, traveling 6 hours by plane for a meeting for, you know, 40 minutes, which is very much a part of a hierarchical power sort of system, has been leveled. The playing field about it has been leveled with a lot of resistance. But I think that business travel will also be greatly affected in a positive way, which is, you know, really a help for climate change and for everyone's well-being. So I think it really will change the way we work, and I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, thank you, and yes for all of this. I think we go forward together in a new way, with resiliency, with inspiration, with camaraderie, with community. I want to thank you all for being in my life and being here today to really inspire, empower, embolden these young leaders to help them develop their resiliency muscles. So thank you all very much.